Did you just double dip that chip?
Excuse me?
You double dipped the chip.
Double dipped? What are you talking about?
You dipped the chip, you took a bite, and you dipped again.
Live from Joe's mom's basement, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Duggan. You ever wonder how those fearless leaders at the helm of this great nation manage their own money? No, we're not getting political, don't worry. We're headed back into the history books with a woman who studied how our presidents made investments and managed their finances, Megan Gorman. In our headline segment, we're lighting a candle because ERISA is 50 years old. What is ERISA and what does it do? We'll dive in. Plus, speaking of presidents, we'll also share the results of our recent poll where we asked you about investing under the leadership of Democrats and Republicans. Who's the winner? And speaking of winning, you know what else we'll do? I'll help you win by sharing some timely trivia. You'll be the most interesting person in your life after today. It's finally happening. Congratulations. And now, two guys who are ready for pumpkin spice season because they've already got their Uggs on. It's Joe and O-J-J-J-J-G.
I officially saw a pumpkin spice advertisement this last week. And what's bad is we are recording slightly ahead of when you're going to hear this because...
Oh, they've been out.
Slightly ahead. Joe, it's 2023.
That's right.
Yeah. I walked down to a Starbucks for coffee most mornings, and it was written on the window how many days left till PSL season.
PSL.
In like giant lettering. Yes.
You know, he's called a PSL season. And not to stop talking about pumpkin spice latte, because God knows this is what we want to talk about is pumpkin spice latte today. But
have you ever had one?
OG, were you thinking the same thing though when Doug said today we're lighting a candle? I'm like, you didn't again. It's a small basement.
Exactly. It's a match.
Like why?
Match.
And then I'm like, oh, it's a birthday. Arissa turning 50, OG.
50
yeah. Years old. For Arissa, we're going to talk about what that means for your money.
Isn't it crazy that you guys are older than Arissa?
I was just going to say, all you did was open the door for OG to make another age joke.
How old were you when Arissa came out? It's like -7. I was 11. It's like, oh, what was life before Arissa like? BE before Arissa. I want to know that.
Tell me, Grandpa. I'm sure there are children across America going, tell me, Grandpa, what was life like before ERISA? Were things different? Was it all just everybody, unicorns and rainbows and pensions all the time? Is that what it was for everybody?
Golden watches. We all died 3 years after we retired. Perfect.
We got a great show. Megan Gorman talking about how our presidents have handled their money in history. I love our historical episodes. Going to do one of those today. But before all that, we've got some sponsors who make this show free so that you don't have to pay for it. They do the heavy lifting. So let's thank them with our time here for just a couple minutes. We'll be right back. Megan Gorman coming up next. Megan is called a wealth historian. She's the founding partner of Checkers Financial Management, fee-only planning firm specializing in high net worth and ultra high net worth families in San Francisco. She's in the top 12% of all wealth managers. But today, she's talking about our presidents and how they actually made money, or in some cases, lost money. I loved our last history lesson back on June 10th. It's episode 1529 when Paolo Zanoni was here. He normally known for his work with Goldman Sachs and Prada, but he went through the history of banking, and that was an amazing look at how the things we think are current today, things like the fintech disasters that we've seen lately, those things happening back in the 1500s, it turns out. Also turns out that many of us and some of us in high positions also can be bad with money. Megan Gorman going to explain that next. So let's say hello to Megan Gorman. I'm super happy she's here with us. Megan Gorman's here. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. I'm so excited to be on Stacking Benjamins. Like, I've listened to you guys for a long time, and I can't believe I'm here.
Well, stop. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. I don't know. I haven't heard a question yet. So if they get to be really difficult, we might not want to like give any compliments right now.
I'm so happy talking to you because, you know, in this contentious election season, everybody's talking about presidential candidates and who's going to be the next president. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to talk about that. And this is like so much fun to talk about how these are people like us. So let's begin kind of where you begin though, Megan.
Sure.
Because you start off this project with Lobster, right? And there's a guy and he's peering over the books looking at Lobster. And I'm like, okay, president's Lobster, this has to be like JFK, but it's not.
No, not at all.
Tell me about which president and what's going on with Lobster.
In 1921, right before he gets polio, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gets this idea he wants to invest in a company. Now, FDR is a lot like wealthy people today, right? They love startups, they love investing, they love doing, let's see if this idea really gets traction. And so he invests in this idea of lobsters, of having lobsters be sent all around the country so that every American could have lobster. Now, obviously, if we were doing due diligence, I would have asked him, I would have said, hey, FDR, how many Americans can actually afford lobster in 1921?
Right.
But again, it sounded like a great idea. He invests in it and it starts to go pear-shaped really, really quickly. And as we all know, he's fighting polio. He's in the struggle for his life. And so when going through the records, what you realize is, like a lot of wealthy people, FDR had people who managed his stuff. Right? Who wrote the letters, who did the due diligence, who did the negotiating. I was able to find at the FDR library all these letters, usually between Louis Howe, who was one of his political gurus, and the lobster people trying to work through the fact that the investment was going south because they hadn't thought through all the different pieces of what it would take to bring lobsters all around the country. It's really interesting to see here because, like a lot of us, when we invest in something, he's trying to make decisions of, does he cut bait or does he keep going? And it's such a humanizing thing because I don't know about you, Joe, but when you think of FDR, he's so distant to us. He's almost the coolest character in history, very hard to connect with, even though there's something about him that's very, Americans connected with him greatly. And what I loved about this is it made him incredibly human and a lot like us in making financial decisions.
Well, and I thought not even wealthy people. Like, what's the number one thing people do, Megan? They go start a restaurant, right?
Correct.
And these aren't wealthy people. It's like, I like to cook, so I need to start a restaurant. You're like, whoa, hold, pump the brakes a little bit. This is a crazy idea. Investing in lobsters and these startups, they always sound so sexy. And yet, what is it? It's not the sexy stuff that often wins.
Exactly. It isn't. We've gotten used to people using financial advisors, tax people, attorneys, and so on in navigating their money. But what I learned a lot in looking at the presidents is a lot of them didn't have the best sounding boards to talk to, right? They didn't have podcasts to listen to. They didn't have articles to read. They were trying to figure it out on their own. And one thing that they have in common with we all have today, which is the wealthier you are, the more you can't talk about it. I mean, FDR wasn't going to be able to ask just anybody for financial help. He had to look like he knew what he was doing because he was wealthy. And he's an interesting person because also what most people don't realize is he didn't actually run his money. His money was held in trust from both the Roosevelt side and the Delano side. And his mother was his trustee.
Wow.
Yeah.
You had to get permission then to do the lobster thing from her?
He did. It's interesting when you read their letters, right? And the letters are a great place to understand how people are thinking about money. Probably the same with our emails today or our texts.
Yeah.
But he would be writing his mother or Eleanor about what was going on. And then you would see in there like a couple sentences like, hey, I need money for this, or this is what's going on. Can you send a check for that? And so it's sort of embedded into their conversations, just like it is for us today. But he often was asking for money, asking for help. And for him, it was his sense of normal. Because again, there isn't one right way to run money. And for him, this is what felt like the right way to do it.
I got to ask this question because some of my favorite mentors we've had on the show, Megan, are history professors. And we can learn so much from the history of the Wild West to, you talk about John Adams. We had a professor on who we called the episode Abigail Adams, Financial Badass, because she, where John, and you talk about this in your book, John, very conservative, close to the bone. Abigail's out doing these kind of reckless loans to fund the revolution. with their money when she's not even allowed to own property, right? Being a
Right.
woman
Right.
during the revolution, she can't do it. So I have these historians, they're professors. Why Megan Gorman and the history of presidents? I think we need to start there because that was my first question.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I have been into the presidents since I was 6 years old, right? I'm from a very small town. It's called Cape May, New Jersey. It's gotten bigger over the years, but when I was growing up, it was a small town. And in reading a lot of the president's stories, what always sort of resonated with me was it's not uncommon to hear of a poor boy, and so he's a boy, unfortunately, but maybe we'll get there. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they go off in, it's the typical hero's journey. They go off in search of the American dream. And along the way, they make money. And if you look at the stories of our presidents, Martin Van Buren, Abraham Lincoln, Lyndon Johnson, it is a common theme in the story. So the presidents always resonated with me. And I love the idea when I'd be reading history books, they'd say, oh, so-and-so bought a house. But that was all would be written in the book, right? It would just be a sentence and they moved on. And I know from working with clients, buying a house is incredibly stressful. And there's a lot that goes into it. And a lot of your, not just the money part, but your financial values go into it. What was really interesting for me, Joe, in going through this was, and it was never easy, but as I read about how much easier it was, or, people could climb like that, it became really clear to me that where we are today is very different than where we were 50, 100, 150 years ago. It's harder for more Americans to achieve the American dream.
But what's so interesting is the huge number of lessons, to your point, that we can learn from these people. Like, as an example, some of the presidents that you profile, money's kind of figures secondarily into their being. It's a happenstance. And for some of them, it's because they had it. For others, they didn't have it. It just didn't seem to matter as much. And for others, and let's take to just go to today. At one point, we had Joe Biden against Donald Trump.
Yep.
And both of these two, ostensibly at the time, candidates that were going to be running for president, their net worth, and specifically real estate, is a big part of who they are. Like, it's how Donald Trump, real estate, Joe Biden. I didn't even know this till I read your book, Megan. Joe Biden, real estate figures very much into who he sees himself as.
Well, if you think about it, Joe, right? First of all, the American dream, owning your own home, even today when they survey Americans, it's something most people will still say is part of the American dream. Now, you and I know today we have an inventory issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for, my book is non-political, but I would tell anyone listening that one of the things that they should look at with both presidential platforms with Harris and Trump is both of them are talking about housing. Both of them know this is a crisis. But when we look at Trump and Biden, and again, this is non-political, both of them bring up interesting aspects of personal finance. So for Biden, he grew up a poor boy in Scranton. He's middle-class Joe. He loves that image. But he also knew getting a house would propel him forward. Now, we all know what happened to him in the 70s. His first wife and his daughter are killed in a horrible car accident right by Christmas. And his two sons survive. And when you work with people who have gone through trauma, one of the things you have to focus on is to slow them down. Because when your brain has gone through that, there sometimes can be a bit of frenetic decision making. And, while I don't work with Joe Biden, I would tell you that as you watch him go through house transactions, there's a freneticness to it, right? And not thinking through to the end, all of the different aspects of buying a home. And we see this in a home he buys in Delaware. And remember, Delaware, if you've ever been to Wilmington, Delaware, if you ever think there's blue bloods in U.S. history, I will tell you, go to Wilmington, Delaware. It's
and it'll prove it.
It'll prove it.
Yeah.
So he buys this huge house, but he can't really afford the maintenance on it.
It's like you write that it's this old DuPont estate that they were going to tear down. Like, this thing was ready for the wrecking ball, and he's going to do the great American thing and save the property and make it all beautiful. And it's his chance to get the beautiful mansion. And it turns into, who was it? Shelley Long. This is an old movie guy reference.
Yeah, The Money Pit?
Yeah, Shelley Long and Tom Hanks, right?
The Money Pit, yes. His struggles with the house are very much in line with what a lot of us deal with buying a house, but it's a bit amplified, right? Because he just overspends, he's frenetic. You take that, right? And even you take some of the things you see him do today, like when you look at his personal finances, you can find over time, he borrowed against his life insurance policies. He's always sort of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And he really doesn't make money at the level that we would think a president could make until after he leaves the vice presidency when he gets the book deals, right? And what does he do when he gets the book deals? He and Jill buy a house in Rehoboth Beach, which I can tell you as a girl from the Jersey Shore is the ultimate house goal. And so you see him struggle over the years. Now, when you look at Trump, and obviously it's not Trump Biden anymore in this election, Trump's an interesting guy, right? There's a lot going on with him, and a lot that I would tell you if you and I had his tax return out, most people wouldn't be able to understand it. I'm in the tax world, so I would understand it, but there's a lot that he's doing. He's all show. He's wealthy. He's good at it, or so he claims. But he also at times...
Wait a minute, Donald Trump and show? Did we say that in the same sentence?
He's a showman,
I didn't know that.
Yes. And look, a lot of our presidents are incredibly charismatic, right? He's in a long line of them. I think the thing that he does is he's not afraid to ask questions. And then what I always found interesting is you read the book, The Art of the Deal. One of the things that you sort of see him do all the time is he's constantly working the phones. What's going on? What do you do? And I have clients that are like Trump like this, right? They're always calling around. What's going on? Trying to understand by gathering data. And I think that's really interesting because it helps with his financial decision-making. Now, we don't know if the decision-making is good or bad because we can't see the records, but data is important. And that is one thing when you contrast him with someone like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton wants you to fall in love with him. That's the Clinton charm. Anyone who's ever met Clinton in person, whether they are for him or against him, talks about this charisma. He just pulls you in.
Just exudes it. I met him. He came to Texarkana, believe it or not. It was part of a governor campaign several years ago, and he came, and obviously somebody that big comes to your hometown. Doesn't happen often in a little town like ours. This dude gets up on stage, and it's funny, he's there with two other politicians, state politicians, and Megan. He was so much more, degrees charismatic, more exponentially more charismatic than the other two gentlemen on that stage. It blew me away.
It's a magic. The thing is, in that magic, I think at times it's put him at risk, right? We look at Whitewater. Whitewater, if they put the deal in front of you and me, we would be kicking the can around, right? What is this? Why is this work? Why are we going to buy land for retirement homes if there's no infrastructure? These are like common sense questions. But again, when you're in a charisma world and you work on relationships, a lot of times you're trying to use the relationship to do your due diligence. I trust the person, so I'm going to go along with it. And that's what burns Clinton with the Whitewater deal. And by the way, relationships in building wealth are very, very important. You look at presidents like Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan grew up poor in Illinois, alcoholic father. He literally learned budgeting from his mother because he had to. They were struggling to survive. But if you look over the course of Reagan's career, he was very good at making relationships, long-term relationships that propelled him forward. And one in particular was with Lou Wasserstein, who was a big agent and producer in Los Angeles in the 40s and 50s. And it was due to that relationship that helped him get the SAG presidency role. And then later propelled him when he was struggling financially to get the GE Theater job. Now today, people are like, the GE Theater, what is that? But back in the 50s, they came up with this idea that they were going to use state-of-the-art, top-notch actors to put on plays and shows once a week. And they needed an announcer. And they hired Reagan to do it. It'd be like Ronald Reagan being the lead-in to the morning show today or The Bear. He would show up, talk to you about the show, and then turn it over to the show. And this got him to then work for GE, touring the country, giving speeches and making money. And in the 50s, he was making about $150,000 a year, which is unbelievable. Wow. But he did that through relationships. Now, he took his relationships and his ability and propelled it forward, but it was an interesting way to build wealth.
That's so interesting. I want to go back to this idea, though, of financial anxiety. You talk about presidents being anxious and not being able to talk to anybody. You do this interesting deep dive into Calvin Coolidge. And I found this Coolidge part of the book interesting because I went and visited the Coolidge homestead while I was in Vermont. It's so beautiful.
It is.
It's so unbelievably beautiful. But what an interesting character. And here's a guy who the whole time he's in office, he's got some incredible backing, but he never buys a house. Why did Calvin Coolidge wait so long to buy a house?
So he's an interesting character, right? Like the word thrifty, he uses constantly, and he is the shortest presidential memoir on record. Truman is volumes, Clinton has another book coming out. They all have books. And then his is
How
like
about Grant, who we'll get to here in a minute?
Oh, Grant.
Monster.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, his was a necessity, right?
Right.
So,
right.
which we'll get into. But Coolidge came from a family that was almost like a missionary family. And he always knew he was going to be supported by them. So he made some financial value decisions where he decided he wasn't going to spend a lot. And he didn't want to have conflict of interest. Coolidge did live through some of the early panics of the 1900s. So that probably also colored it because he worked for the banks. But he always felt that if he had a mortgage, he would be beholden to that bank, almost to special interests. I mean, I can't imagine how he'd feel about politics today. He'd probably fall over.
Yeah. Oh
but
my
he
goodness.
and his wife, they never, ever buy a house. And this is when, if you drive in certain parts of America today, you'll see certain houses, they all sort of look alike. It was back when like Sears was selling houses by a catalog, right? People were building houses. It was part of the dream. But they rented, and they even rented when he became vice president and lived in Washington in a rented home. But they didn't buy a house until after he left the White House. And they did it for a weird reason. They did it because the rental house they had for years was actually a duplex, and there were crowds coming to the house too much. So they realized they needed privacy. But here's what's interesting about him. He leaves office right before the Great Depression. He's friends with Charles Merrill, who wants him first to join the board of Merrill Lynch. He was going to pay him like $100,000 a year. And Coolidge is like, no, I don't really know enough to help you.
That blew me away, by the way.
Right?
I would have been like, I don't know anything, but I'm in.
I'm in, right? And you have to remember, at this time, Charles Merrill's going around telling everybody things are going to crash. So not only does he know Charles Merrill, turned down the board, here's this prophecy of a big market crash, Coolidge hires a different investment firm to run his money. This investment firm, at the beginning, the crash happens in October of 29, Herbert Hoover's president, and Coolidge in the early 1930, his firm that he's working with says, listen, don't worry, this is all over, pretty much over. It's okay to put your money in the market. So he starts buying stocks in early 1930. And of course, the markets continue to crash. And he gets burned by that. But he does sell some of those holdings to buy a house. He lives in it for a few years before he passes away. But again, very, very fearful of conflict of interest. And I believe he probably had some financial anxiety, because if you also look in his life story, he lost his mother and his sister when he was very young. And those type of traumas, like we see with Biden, can sometimes really impact behavior. So, my point in this is, if you feel like you've had some really big trauma, it probably often helps to work with a professional in running your finances to make sure you're making the right decisions.
It was one of my favorite parts of this project, Megan, when you said that, and I love the rationale, but because often, in online forums, and sometimes I just want to poke my eyes out in these online forums I have to go into as part of my role here, because you see these straw man arguments, which is, no, you don't need to work with a professional because you're smart enough. And certainly for 90% of our stackers listening, no, for all of them, you're smart enough. Mm-hmm. But also keeping it simple is the name of the game, and you can keep it simple. Yes. Okay. That's great. But you don't make any of those points. It's not that you're not smart enough. It's that your professional's not emotionally attached. It's another person who knows what the hell's going on and is very smart, that can battle with you, and they don't have the emotions that Calvin Coolidge has about the whole situation.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, it doesn't have to be a professional. It could be you're in an investment club, or you have a buddy or a friend that you always are talking to, but you want someone who is not emotionally engaged. And I think what makes the stories of the presidents so interesting and non-political is it actually humanizes them, because they all had a lot of the same stresses that we have today. Now, I know in modern presidencies, people finish and now they make a ton of money. I'm sure we'll see another Biden book deal, regardless of who wins or loses. I'm sure the vice presidential candidate who doesn't win and the presidential candidate who doesn't win, they're both going to get book deals.
You'll see them all get book deals.
Everybody gets the book deal.
Right. Sure. Well, and what's interesting is how much relationships factor into all of these presidents. I mean, you talked about relationships with Reagan. You talked about relationships with Bill Clinton. Let's go back in history again. Let's talk about Ulysses Grant, because we talked about this earlier. Ulysses Grant, you bring up this idea of luck, and people talk about, hey, they got lucky with investments. And you kind of question that and go, is it luck, or do we kind of make or I guess in the case of Ulysses Grant, dismake, is that a word?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know, or behave in a way to undo it, right?
Yes,
Well, it's
right.
interesting because I work in the high net worth world, and when I meet with clients for the first time, like a lot of people, you ask their story, and people will be like, "Well, I got this opportunity. I worked hard. I went to this school. I was good at budgeting. Oh, and I had luck." And I'm always like, "Wait, they all mention luck." And it's a weird thing. So when you actually study luck, there's a lot more to it than just like a little leprechaun giving you a shamrock. Some of it is behaving consistently and taking lessons from what you're learning. So with Ulysses S. Grant, he was an interesting person, a fascinating Civil War hero, fascinating life story. But he spent a lot of his life without money at all. Grew up with not a lot of money, gets into West Point and joins the military. And he's sort of an odd dude. Like if you were in the army with him, he learned how to work supply chain. That was his job. But he was much more a horse whisperer. He was better with animals and with people. And I think because he connected with animals so, he was in a way very, very trusting. And so over the course of his life, from his time in Zachary Taylor's army to when he's out west, even during his time when he was working for his family's store, we hear him being incredibly trusting of people. And that trust often burns him. And so at the end of his life, he's involved with an investment firm. His partner basically gets him into a Ponzi scheme and he loses all their money. And he then finds out he's dying, right? And he has a great love for his wife, Julia Dent. It's a great love story of presidential marriages. He had met her when he was at West Point. She was the sister of one of his peers. He was always doing everything for Julia. And he first did some short stories and realized he was a good writer. And then he got a book contract. And he was helped by Mark Twain. And he literally wrote up until, I believe, 3 days before he died. And the book was a great success and it gave his family money.
That always blows me away, by the way, just to stop you, just right there. I mean, yeah, I'm getting help from my buddy Mark Twain,
Right.
helping me write my thing.
But there's relationships, right? And you got to wonder if we went back to the earlier part of his career in the 1850s when he's out west and he tries all these get-rich-quick schemes. He's going to ship ice from Vancouver down to San Francisco, right, with a bunch of buddies. But then it takes too long and all the ice melts. He decides he's going to invest in a social club in San Francisco, and the person they invest with runs off with all the money. The one thing that he does that actually makes him money is this book at the end. And it's not lost on me that the value of the relationship with Mark Twain probably also helped because Twain probably protected him from trusting too much. So that was a really good thing for him and it helped his family. But over the course of his life, you'd look at him and be like, God, this guy doesn't have any luck. And it wasn't that he didn't have, it was more that he was too trusting and that trustingness undid any potential opportunity set that he had. And he had good opportunity sets.
Well, and you talk about this, a couple things. Number one is he never got it in writing, never got stuff in writing. It was often, Megan, a handshake deal. And as an attorney, that's got to drive you crazy.
Totally. But then, you think back to the Civil War and you think about the generals who worked with him and who adored him. I mean, his people in the army loved him. So what worked, people behave in the same way and what works for them 80% of the time they stick with. Probably for him being in the military, it worked, this idea of trust. It's how the military operates. And so he was having success there and it was probably pretty confounding that the rules of engagement on that side didn't apply to real life. And in 1850s, West Coast, which was technically the Wild West, the gold rush. I mean, San Francisco grew by 150,000 people, I think, in less than 2 years. He just got caught up with people. He liked their ideas, but he didn't follow through with all the elements that we would have wanted him to do. He didn't do his due diligence and secure himself with things in writing. And that's what undid him.
There also, it isn't lost on me too, just this idea of shortcuts, right? I felt like FDR wasn't looking for a shortcut as much as he liked the sexy stuff.
Oh, totally.
He thought that the sexy investment, and I get caught up in that. And I've been doing this for a long time. And man, if you tell me a great story, I'm like, oh, that's going to make money.
Right.
It just seems crazy when the boring stuff is often a better approach. But this idea of a shortcut, I felt like Grant is so frustrated with his inability to make money. He's like this feeling that I got to catch up, versus Calvin Coolidge, where his dad teaches him, you write that his dad teaches him early on, just put money in the bank. And that's security.
Yeah. One of the things I think people get caught up in is this idea of getting rich quick. And we see it in the presidents. We saw it in Grant. We see it in Harry Truman. And I think what most people don't realize, and I've seen this over the years in working with the wealthy, is it's very slow, very slow, very slow. And then all of a sudden it happens really fast. That power of compounding, the thing of doing the repeatable action again and again and again. And the best stuff is boring. We all want to be the guy that invested in Facebook, right? We all wanted to be the guy who did, or gal who did these great, crazy risk-taking things. But the truth of the matter, that type of investing is really for people who have money. Most of us really need to be slow and steady and keep our eye on the ball. And so when you think about what looks sexy, for FDR, he was known in the White House for having wonderful cocktail hours. Even during the war, everything stopped and he mixed cocktails. And by all accounts, he was a horrible mixologist. But he was the president. You had to drink it. I think I've read that Churchill only drank champagne during cocktail hour because he didn't want FDR mixing his cocktails. But FDR could afford to take that risk, could afford to chase sexy, because you know what? He had trust funds. One of my favorite stories about FDR is he was Assistant Secretary of the Navy during the Wilson administration. And when they asked him, well, where do you want your paycheck to go? He's like, no, just give it to me in cash. He didn't realize you should put it in a bank or take it home. And it took a few months. And finally, Eleanor's like, look, I got to pay for stuff around here. Where's your paycheck? And he really he had no self-awareness of like how weird it was that he was just taking a bunch of cash and not dealing with it. And by the way, another thing I found, it's not in the book, but one time he forgot to file his tax returns. And he literally writes the IRS and he's like, yeah, I lost the records somewhere between Warm Springs and New York. I don't know. I'll get to it. Like very nonchalant. And so think about that. Right. My bad. So his stories are more the exception, but he can afford to do that. For the average person, right, for like you and me, slow, steady, predictability, those are the way to go. And then when there is a potential for taking on risk, being very strategic about it.
But it's so wild that he's from a wealthy family and JFK also from a wealthy family. But JFK, and we won't get into this today, but JFK really minded his pennies and was very much not at all Pollyanna about, hey, any of this stuff. Like it felt much more savvy. But I want to end on this question.
Sure.
Going through all the presidents, was it Thomas Jefferson, maybe the worst of all the presidents with his money, if you had to categorically say who sucked the most with cash?
Yeah, it's hard to label just one, right? I think I would tell you that the troika of Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, they were not the people you wanted to follow financially. But yes, I think Jefferson, because it's such a strong contrast to his image, right? He was brilliant. God, to even just be able to write and think like that. But he also was unable to really do the right type of thinking in terms of money. We sit with people and we say, hey, what did you envision retirement? Where are you going to be in 20, 30 years? Jefferson lived very much in the moment, didn't plan for that, partly because of the fact that he owned a lot of land. And so he had illiquidity. And then at the same time, I think he had a lot of loss in his life. So you just don't connect with who you are. So I would tell you, don't be a Jefferson, and you can check it out in the book, but be a Washington.
Be a Washington.
Right. Caveat to both were slaveholders, so that's obviously reprehensible. But yes, be a Washington. George Washington was amazing.
Maybe even be a Lincoln. The stuff you go into about Lincoln, just powerful. I felt like Lincoln, see now I'm still going and I keep saying, we're going to stop, but I can't help it. Lincoln, no education, but created his own curriculum, which was really cool. I felt like he kind of created his own university curriculum.
Yeah, but he failed a lot. And to be very direct, the first 25 years of his life, he was constantly failing, borrowing from people, being chased down for debt. He did something that a lot of presidents did to move themselves up wealth-wise. He married up. And Mary Todd was obviously from a wealthy family. Her father was able to help them out. And Lincoln had learned lessons. And so he did get a little more conservative over the course of his life, because during the Civil War, he does save. And he saves constantly into treasury notes and bonds. But they were paying like 6 to 7%. So good on him, right? He did sort of figure it out, but he was a learning being. And I would tell this to anyone. The lesson to take from Lincoln's money is anyone can learn how to work with money, how to manage their money, and don't take failure as a reason not to keep learning, because those sort of failures teach you more than sometimes the big successes can. And I know, Joe, enough about your story, and you probably agree with that. I know in college I got into trouble with credit cards. Like, those things teach you everything. And so, have faith that you can learn from the pivot.
Man, I think we'll stop on that mic drop right there.
Exactly.
The book is called All the President's Money, and it is available everywhere.
Yep, Joe, it is. And please check it out. And I'll be visiting some of the presidential libraries. So come on down.
Oh, that's fabulous. Fantastic. Have you visited many so far?
I have visited a bunch. I will tell you, I've also worked with a lot online because a lot of it's online.
Sure.
You know what? They're all different and unique and they all reflect their personalities. I would tell you that I sort of get a kick out of LBJ's. His is really an interesting place because
it is.
Yeah, Lady Bird is also a very defining character in who he is as president and they saved everything. So you can go through the archives and there's a lot of great stuff there.
We have 4 nearest. I haven't been to either one of the Bush libraries, and I need to do that next time in College Station or in Dallas. Heck, I'm in Dallas fairly often. I should get to that one. But LBJ was really cool. The Clinton Library, really cool. Like those libraries close to us. I'd tell anybody, go visit any of them because to your point, so much history and so
the
cool.
one by me is Reagan and they have Air Force One in it.
Oh, fabulous.
So go check it out. Yeah, they're great resources for anyone. And remember, these libraries aren't political in the sense when you're going to the exhibits. This is a celebration of American history and the American dream.
Well, speaking of that, thanks for being such a mentor to our stackers today, Megan, helping us. It's a divisive time every 4 years, right? And to unify among, these people are really more like us than we think. There's a lot of lessons we can learn. I super appreciate it.
Exactly. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Hey there, stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and today's the anniversary of the release of one of the best movies of all time. Shawshank Redemption opened in theaters on today's date way back in 1994 and is a movie about a guy who's imprisoned in Ohio. What a nightmare that would be, wouldn't it? Ooh, God, all of that scarlet and gray running around. I mean, terrifying, right? I've wondered that for some time. How do they keep people in Ohio today? Is it like fenced off or something? And is there like a warning label when you're about to go into Ohio? Like, caution, friend, you're trying to enter Ohio. Don't you want to go back to Michigan, aka God's country?
I just go around it.
I know. I think that's a good plan. Just all the way around. Get to a much better place like West Virginia. Well, in this chilling tale, the starring character played by Tim Robbins was initially slated to be played by none other than Tom Cruise. But when the director Cruise was hoping to work with wasn't assigned to the project, Cruise cruised. But with Tim Robbins playing the title character and Morgan Freeman as his mentor, the film still had star power, but it initially failed to make money. By the time it left the box office in November, Shawshank had only earned $18 million of its estimated $25 to $28 million budget. And the number one reason it failed to make money? John Travolta. God, if I hit a nickel every time Anyway, what Travolta-led movie... Here's today's question. What Travolta-led movie, which also had won the Cannes Film Festival earlier in the year, was mopping up Benjamins while Shawshank Redemption was flopping? I'll be back right after I go see if I can get Joe's mom to cook me a cheeseburger. Hey there, stackers. I'm Royale with Cheese Lover and guy who can dance with Uma Thurman better than you, Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. Joe's mom just clarified something for me. Tim Robbins wasn't imprisoned in Ohio. They only filmed the movie in Mansfield, Ohio, at a prison where you can still take ghost tours on autumn evenings. I think the whole state of Ohio would be a great home for a horror story tour, but what do I know? Today's trivia question is, what John Travolta-led film beat the pants off Shawshank Redemption way back in 1994? The answer, of course, it was Quentin Tarantino's sophomore effort, Pulp Fiction. And now, back to Joe, OG, and some woman named ERISA.
Huge thanks to Megan Gorman. OG Ulysses S. Grant sounds a lot like Doug. Maybe a Ponzi scheme or two.
What?
Just he's going to go out smoking cigars and drinking bourbon.
It is interesting, though. I'll tell you what was really interesting to me is that for Ulysses Grant, the way he worked, Ulysses S. Grant, the way that he worked, and the reason people loved him so much when he was a general was that he was Mr. Handshake Deal. He was like, hey, let's get this done. He was a man of action. And what's funny is that investing is definitely a place where being, quote, a person of action, it's literally maybe the only place where not taking action is often the better option than, hey, let's go get this done.
I mean, once your money's invested, yes. If you're sitting at a pile of cash and you're like, I can't make a decision, that's also equally bad. But far more people get in trouble by trying to do stuff, the proverbial, how should I react to this person being elected or this policy being enacted or this tax rate being changed or whatever? It's like probably nothing. And probably the best thing is to just keep investing.
Also, FDR's love of sexy investments. We see that one all the time too, right? Ooh, hey, this sounds great. This sounds like a great story. Like if somebody can tell you a great story, how many people have been trapped in that?
We were just having this discussion, as a matter of fact, in my household as it relates to college application essays. And I'm curious, as you gentlemen have had a number of people proceed through college. Obviously, two successful gentlemen here who have helped shepherd a couple of kiddos through college. So in the college application essay, do you guys think that the essay is primarily there to demonstrate writing skills or storytelling skills?
Interesting. I think it's the latter. I think it's storytelling skills.
Interesting. Okay.
Everything that I've heard from college admissions officers says Doug's right. It is more maturity and the way you view the world. Yeah.
University of Chicago has a famous essay question, famous because it's different every year and it's usually very unusual compared to
Wouldn't that make it
other colleges.
Infamous if it's different every year?
Well, infamous is usually like the bad kind of famous, like evil people are infamous. Anyway,
Infamous, but
the
okay.
year my oldest son applied, the question was super wide open, which was just, there's two kinds of people in this world. What are they? And they're looking for very, off,
Creative.
kind of off to the side, creative. And so he
Interesting.
went with, there's two kinds of people in this world, those who go to Chipotle and those who go to Qdoba. And he actually did the whole thing on an economic decision on people who want their guac included in the price, or they want it separated and will choose to pay for it separately, and what that tells them, or what that tells the world about their economic viewpoint.
Well, what this means with the presidential money decisions, I have no idea.
No. Why did you bring it up?
Just having this conversation with a planner buddy of mine who was interviewing a new client, and the new client was pretty sure that he was getting 17% a year and hadn't had a negative year in 15 years. And I was like, that sounds like you're getting told a pretty good story. I think you might want to, sounds like a great intern project of, all right, well, that sounds awesome. Send me your statement and we will do an analysis of how great your return has been over the last 15 years. If you found the guy. And then just on the heels of that, Doug sent me a link to a podcast, The Most Successful Hedge Fund in History. So, I guess it is doable, but a lot of times it's just a big story.
Was that Renaissance Capital?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. And by the way, if people are wondering about how I get that, you can't get in.
I was going to say, I guarantee you, your buddy's not in Renaissance Capital.
Yes. You are not allowed to get in.
No, this was a potential client situation, but yeah, he definitely is not.
It's a very good story on the Acquired podcast.
Indeed.
I listened to that one the second that Doug sent it to me. How about that? I actually, what's going on here?
Like you literally hit play as soon as he texted?
The next morning. Yeah. Out on my run.
So not the second, but like the next day.
And then you took off half a day to listen to their 4-hour podcast on Renaissance Technologies.
All right. I didn't listen to the full thing right away, and I didn't do it right then. Welcome to Semantics, the podcast.
I'm guessing you probably also listened to it at 2x speed. So did you actually listen to the whole thing?
Yeah.
Did you?
Joe's a liar.
So tell me,
I just asked ChatGPT for some reason. That's all I do.
Did you really LOL, or did you just write that? The LOL.
I really LOL.
Our headline today that we're actually going to get to comes to us from Forbes. It's a big day, OG, because ERISA, well, it's not specifically today, but this year, ERISA turns 50, reflecting on 50 years and looking to the future. Dan Doonan writes this. Dan writes, major milestones are a good opportunity to pause, reflect, and think about where we are heading. This year is a major milestone for the retirement industry as the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 reaches its 50th anniversary. The actual date happened back early in September. But OG, ERISA was really the thing that changed it for the way that we think about retirement. Really, for better or worse, has put you and me in the driver's seat.
I mean, it kind of ushered in the changes around changing from a defined benefit plan of work here for 30 years and, that's how you retire, to defined contribution plans of like, let's do 401ks and that sort of thing. And if you think of it, I think it also probably helped with innovation and creativity and at some level job security too, because as an employee, you could move your retirement. That wasn't a thing, right? And so if you had skills or you wanted to work on the latest and greatest project, or you could take your skills and be rewarded financially elsewhere, that opened up that as a bigger opportunity because you could take your retirement with you. You can, obviously do 401k rollovers, right? So it's like, it was a thing that really didn't exist as much, or certainly probably hampered innovation and movement and that sort of thing within different industries. So lots of secondary byproducts for sure. Probably some things we could do without, but
some things that I didn't realize were that it really standardized the way that pensions paid out money. At the time, of course, that ERISA was enacted, pensions were the primary type of retirement plan, to your point.
Mhm.
Since then, they paid out roughly $8.7 trillion to America's seniors. Well, no, whoa, that's just since 2009, according to this piece. According to the Investment Company Institute, another $12 trillion still held by pensions that invest and manage these funds for the benefit of still 25 million retirees and millions of workers. Another success, they say, is the PBGC, which, of course, when your pension goes up, we've seen this a few times, OG, when somebody works for a company and they go bankrupt.
General Motors.
Yeah.
Delphi.
Pension benefit guarantee steps up. There's just a couple. You could keep coughing.
Teamsters.
Yeah. Over and over and over and over and over.
Basically all the industries that my parents were involved in. Truck driver, General Motors, and moved to Delphi because Delphi's the new thing. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to take that new job. And thankfully, PBGC stepped in and helped a little bit. They certainly don't recover all your pension, but they at least give you something to build a base on. So
I was thinking, if you're an older person living in a Rust Belt state, the letters PBGC. You're very
Pension
familiar.
Benefit Guarantee Corp. Basically, if people are like, what is this thing, right? It's basically an insurance policy on your pension. So if your pension goes bankrupt, the government steps in and says, we're not guaranteeing the full thing, right? We're not guaranteeing, hey, you had a $5,000 a month pension, here's $5,000 a month to make you whole. They have their own calculation of how they would do it, but they give you something. It might only be $1,500 a month instead of $5,000, but it's a little bit. So it's helped a lot of people,
They do say that despite the success of ERISA, there still are some challenges. According to AARP, nearly 57 million people, or 48% of American private sector employees age 18 to 64, work for an employer that does not either offer traditional pension or any retirement savings plan. Let's talk about that for a second, but let's say you're in the other 52%. Let's talk to the majority first, OG. If you've got 401k, 457, 403b, you've got a retirement plan available. Let's talk about making that thing work. What do you think the number one thing to do if you have one of these plans to be successful would be?
I'd say the number one thing is to make sure that you're taking advantage of all of the free money. If your company is giving you a 3% match or a 50% match on the first 6, or, whatever the match is, you need to take advantage of. The second thing, very closely related to that, is under no circumstances can you touch it. If I look back at the common mistakes that are made between 20 and 40-year-olds, it's basically somewhere along the line, something happens, life changes, and it turns into, well, I've got a little bit of money in my 401k. Maybe I'll just use that to buy the house or to help me get out of debt or, whatever. Roth IRAs are a great example of this, right? You get the option to use some of the gains for a house purchase, or, you can take the proceeds out at any time. And, these different things like, oh, that's tons of flexibility. You're really shooting yourself in the foot when you interrupt that compounding unnecessarily. That's a Charlie Munger line, right? Don't interrupt compounding unnecessarily. And it's happening even though your 10 or 15 or $50,000 account doesn't feel it. You're just like, it's really, now's the time. If I'm going to take some money, I should take it now. No, you shouldn't. Now's the time to let it sit there. Take the money out when you have 2 million and you need a few bucks. Okay, fine. Not when you have 50,000 and you need, 40 grand. Between taking advantage of the full match, and you have to figure out a different way. Just never touch it. Do those two things and you're 80% of the way there.
I think when you're first starting out, forego the worry about, hey, I need to be super diversified and I need to use one of these target date funds because I don't know what I'm doing. Forget all that. Find a good, solid, large company index and go to town.
Yeah. Keep it simple. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to make it complicated for yourself. When your money starts making as much money as you're putting in, then you can start thinking about like adding some diversification.
Yeah, just stick with an index like the S&P 500 or the total stock market index if you have it available. The other thing I like, OG, when somebody's just starting out with one of these plans, if you can afford to do it, use the Roth option versus the pre-tax option. That'll set you up nicely for later.
Early on, you don't know the difference. You haven't experienced the difference cash flow wise. It's very hard when you're 40 to say, I'm going to switch. I'm moving toward peak earning years, and now I'm going to switch out my traditional to Roth 401k. You're going to have a $4,000, $5,000, $8,000 tax bill difference at the end of the year. That's pretty noticeable. You still have the same tax bill difference, by the way, if you do it when you're 25. You just haven't got used to that money yet. So, just play the trick on yourself. I think most people, as I talk to people across the country, I think most people under 40 are using Roth 401ks when available. It seems to be the case.
That's good. Roth, of course, is going to be the tax-free option if you use it correctly.
Yeah.
It'll grow tax-free, and tax-free is exactly what you want. Let's talk to the other half of the universe, OG. This 48% of people, if you don't have a plan available, people listening to us going, hey, this ERISA thing is great, but doesn't affect me. What do those people do?
Well, firstly, I think that you can ask your employer to put something in place. There's so many options, inexpensive 401k plans if you have a company that has enough employees to kind of justify a 401k, relatively low cost plans now. 401ks used to be very expensive, cumbersome to set up. There's a lot of technology around that these days. So reevaluating that, a simple IRA is as simple as you can get a retirement plan. Very easy, very low cost to set up. But if there's not the cash flow or the business isn't big enough, if you're self-employed, you can do a solo 401k. So you and your spouse can do a solo 401k. So there's a couple of options there. If those don't work, then you have to take advantage of IRAs or Roth IRAs on your own. So you can contribute $7,000 if you're under the age of 50 into either an IRA or a Roth IRA. We've kind of already established that the Roth is probably the best place. There's some income limits there. So if you're really, really, really highly paid, you have to be aware of those, and there's ways around that. But that's $7,000. If you have a spouse or a partner, there's another $7,000. And look, that's 14 grand a year. You're not getting a company match on top of it, but 14,000 a year is a pretty gosh darn good start for an investor. And if you have extra and you've got HSAs or, regular brokerage accounts, there's lots of places to put your money if you have extra. But if your company doesn't have anything, then you're the one that has to devise your own retirement plan on your own. And you don't get to say at 65, oh crap, my company didn't have anything. I guess I don't have any retirement money. Like that's on you.
Yeah, I think it's a gimme and a gotcha, right? On the gotcha side, it's hey, I don't have all these things, perks that somebody that works for somebody else has. But on the other side, OG, you now are your own company. You can do whatever the hell you want, which means you set up your automatic savings into the IRA or into the brokerage account, whatever, the HSA, like you were talking about. You set that all up yourself and you're 100% in control, 100% in control, which is pretty great. You don't have a list of funds to choose from. You get to choose anything. And again, I would still keep it simple. Use the total stock market index or S&P 500, whichever one's easiest, and get it going. We will link to this piece in our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. And you know what? We're going to dive even more into the world of 401ks and retirement plans and the 201, our newsletter that we're super excited about, comes out the day after we talk about a topic. And this will be a fun one. If you're interested in how to use your 401k better, Kevin Bailey, who curates these links, always has interesting discussions in the 201 about these topics. Let's talk about a contest that we ran. Not really a contest, more of a question, OG, that you had. We did have some winners that we chose at random from the people that just put it out there. And we had a number of stackers. Thanks for playing the game. And I'm sure those people kind of leaning forward, seeing what they thought. But even if you didn't play the game, let's have you play it now, everybody. Because in celebration of Megan Gorman being here, and, you know, people always seem to have a view of, hey, I think only this group can run the country. OG, you looked at...
What do I do if this person...
Yes. So, OG, for people new to this who are going to just kind of play along, what was the scenario?
A lot of people ask the question of, does it matter if I invest, or should I invest differently if this person's in office or this person's in office? Obviously, we've got, 6 weeks or so before the election. A lot of anxiety around who might win or not win. So we have this research done, and I have the answers right here. So the scenario was back to 1961. So it's been 50 some odd years since 1961. You started with $10,000, and you could invest either only when Republicans are president or when Democrats were president. Republicans in office, your money's invested. Republicans not in office, your money's sitting in cash. Fair enough? Or the other way around. Okay. And so the question then is, how much money do you have? You started with $10,000. How much money do you have if you were invested only when Republicans were president?
You want to hear a few of the guesses we had?
Yeah, let's hear some guesses.
We had a lot of people play the game. Thanks for playing.
What was the median answer? Did we graph this out? Do we have ChatGPT average it out for us?
A lot of people saying between $100,000 and $200,000. A lot of people. The low was somebody thought that it would grow from $10,000 to $35,000. So not a lot of faith. Okay. And on the north end, we had somebody that said $2.2 million was the high.
So the Republican number is, if you started with 10,000, 1961 till present, only invested when Republicans were president, you'd have a little over 100,000, 102,000 and some change.
Not far off, stackers. Nice job.
Yeah. 10x return. Follow-up question. You can only invest when Democrats are president. How much money do you have?
And the responses for Democrats, we had a lot of people, same number, around 150, okay. 200,000, 100,000. Low on this end was 38,000. We had a few people up around 2 million. Again, very, very similar. People thought it was very similar, OG.
Yeah. And so when the Democrats are in office, obviously they're benefiting from all the Republican policies. So if you were to have invested during a Democrat,
no politics on this show,
your 10,000 would have turned into 500,000.
500,000 when Democrats are in office.
500K.
5X.
Yeah. So Democrats
and
are in
all
office
because of the Republicans.
Well, the policies, and then they follow it up, and then the Republicans have to deal with the fix.
Gotcha.
You can see the cycle working, right? You can understand. Okay, so here's the real question, though. So obviously, you put 10,000 in, you get 100K. That's a great return, 10x return in 50 years. You put 10,000 in, you have 500K, so it's a 50x return. It's an amazing return. What if you would have just put 10,000 in on January of 1961 and been completely agnostic as to who was in office? You just left it.
Let it ride.
How much money do you have?
The average person, OG, says around $3 million. The high was $5,445,000. A couple people said lower. We got a couple at 500,000. I don't see anything lower than 500,000.
Yeah. So 100,000 for Republicans, 500,000 for Democrats. If you would have just left the money invested for 50 years, you have a 500x return, $5.1 million on 10,000 50 years ago. So this is obviously expanding.
This is so funny, by the way, because we told people there was going to be no prize for getting it right. Prize. It's somebody got it exactly right. So, or somebody that heard us say that and goes, I think you're wrong. I think I'm going to go look it up anyway. There's no way in hell somebody
literally wrote 5119520.
Yeah, 5.12 they wrote.
Oh, jeez.
Cheaters.
Yes.
Cheaters. You're definitely not winning.
Pumpkin eaters.
Nice try. But that just goes to show the impact of investing, how it completely doesn't matter who's in office. You can look back over the 50 years. There's been lots of great times in the economy. There's been lots of not so great times, wars, inflation, chaos, terrorism, pandemics. There's been all sorts of stuff that's happened, recessions, and it's happened when both parties were in office, right? There's not any clear line of, well, this is way better than that. Although on this chart, investing when Democrats are better than investing with Republicans, I can see that. But you're taking away a 10x return on top of that by trying to play that game. So if you're looking at the election and you're looking at who's leading or who might win or who does win, and you think this is awesome or this is crappy or whatever your personal proclivities are, at the end of the day, from an investing standpoint, your investments don't care. They're run by the smartest people in the world who have one sole outcome in mind: make money. Make money for shareholders. And if you're an investor in those companies, you're going to be okay, regardless of the policies and the politics and whoever's in charge. So I found this to be really interesting. I thought it was really apropos because of the timing of where we are, and a good wrap up to the whole presidential thing.
Well, I think that definitely is great advice. I know that if you're very worried about this, not only take what OG just said to heart, but also go back and listen to our episode that we ran exactly 51 weeks before the election. We had contributors Tim Murray from T. Rowe Price. He's capital market strategist there. We had Ryan Victorin from Fidelity. She is a vice president, financial consulting. And then behavioral economist, Dr. Brad Klontz. And I got to tell you, OG, as we get close to the election, I was just listening to this episode. It sounds like we were just
it's the same
talking
thing
about it today. What should you do? What shouldn't you do in an election year? And you feel like these people can call the future. And they're saying the same thing that you're saying. If you want to know the cliff notes of it, don't is pretty much. But it's episode 1435 is the episode to go back to.
I'm just amazed that people get this wrong, because what all of the smartest people in the world and OG are telling you is to be lazy, do nothing. Everybody in your whole life, you're just waiting for people to say, nah, just sit there, don't worry, relax, take a load off. And that's what we're telling you. And yet you got to tinker with it. You got to just, I got to touch it, got to do something. No, take your hands off it.
You know this is going to blow up people's financial picture. It's going to do it, no matter what we say, every time. Doug, let's mosey out of the back porch before we say goodbye. But even before that, if you're someone who's not just here because you're nervous about the election, or you're here because the history of the presidents, man, we did a lot today. You're here because you really need a better plan. OG and his team are taking clients. So head to stackybenjamins.com/OG. That's the link to him and his team's calendar, and a great way to get started making better money decisions. stackybenjamins.com/OG. Doug, I know we've got a full slate today to talk about before we say goodbye to everybody.
We do. I mean, we can run through it super fast. We've got to, first of all, talk about Stacking Adventures.
Woohoo!
Brand new podcast in the stacking empire. And it's a great new podcast that you've created about traveling. And I know you've got, we're recording this a little bit in advance. The first episode is out, but you've got a pretty, a little bit of an exotic trip coming up. It's, some people.
I thought you were going to talk about episode one with that brilliant guest talking about his trip to Scotland.
I was trying to be humble, as I typically am. But if you want me to talk about how the first episode is probably the best episode you're ever going to have on Stacking Adventures, you can learn all about my trip to Scotland. But I'm sure at some point you're going to talk about this little shindig you're doing down in Peru, or Purdue, as I like to say.
Just got back from Purdue.
Central Indiana, Peru, they're pretty much the same place. I'm going on a very exotic trip to Oregon, renting an RV and going to Oregon. I'm going to have language barriers.
I say alpaca, you say corn.
Right. Same thing. I think alpaca is a type of corn.
Yes.
I'm going to have language differences. They say really weird things in Oregon, like, like muckamuck and salt chuck and Siwash and Tyee. You can't even understand people in Oregon.
Pump your gas. Yeah.
But, tomato. So we've got a couple of those things going on. And I'm sure we hear about a lot of those adventures and other listener adventures in the Stacking Adventures podcast.
Yeah, Stacking Adventures. We had Lee Huffman on talking about travel hacks. We had an episode about packing, about our best packing tips, and we talk about not over flooding the suitcase. And then we also talked about Crystal's adventure to Japan so far.
Wow.
But you know what? This is going to be very, very much a listener and adventurer podcast. So we're going to be profiling a lot of you and your adventures. So if you hear an episode, at the end of every episode, we tell you to chime in. And then a month later, we're going to play your adventures about this. So if you've been to Scotland, you want to chat about Scotland, just go to stackingadventures.com/voicemail. And we're going to talk about that. You've been to Japan. You got some packing tips for people. It's going to be very much a community. It started off, by the way, this started off as a project by Cheryl and I. We were writing blog posts about our adventures. And it's been really fun teaming up with Cheryl to make this site and to work on it. It's been a great time. Doug, you've been, tell me we're not going to talk about Below Deck Mediterranean.
I'll just say season 7, a little bit underwhelming. Natalia, she's a pot stirrer. Natasha is not great at her job. Kyle gets a little bit friendly with some of the guests inappropriately.
Oh, gee, that's horrible.
But
can you believe Kyle's not good at his job? OG?
No, Natasha's not great at her job. Kyle's good, but he just doesn't know where the line is. You just can't fraternize with the guests the way that Kyle did in season 7. So
horrible.
But I will say, when I was traveling recently, I just had a huge road trip from Chicago to Richmond, and on the flight, I wanted to download some stuff and couldn't download Below Deck because I don't have the premium Peacock subscription. So I downloaded Bad Monkey on Apple, and that's a Vince Vaughn vehicle for his, witty, glib banter that he has, his quick silver tongue banter, which I love. I'm a huge fan of. People have said I remind them of Vince Vaughn daily, but I would not recommend. Look at the head shaking is aggressive.
Yeah, sorry,
but I would not recommend it. I would not. It's a series.
Not a good movie.
I watched it because I was trapped on a plane, and
not a good show.
It's fine, but it's not even good Vince Vaughn, let alone a good show. It's just kind of.
By the way, as a guy that just launched a adventure podcast, if you're going to say road trip and then you get on a plane, that's not a road trip.
I actually flew to then have a road trip, which I'm actually going to do again to the Oregon coast. But I flew to Chicago and then drove 12 and a half hours to Richmond. That was the road trip part. And then I flew home.
Makes sense to you, OG. That's what you do every time, isn't it? You fly the wrong way.
Sounds exactly perfect.
Yes. Spoken like somebody who's never looked at a map before. Like, let's go ahead and go to Chicago first.
You know what? On
a flight.
Because Joe, nobody has ever said, I'd like to spend 12 hours in a car with OG. Hey, can you come help me move? That's why he gets out of all of those kinds of trips, because nobody wants him in the car for 12 and a half hours.
Hard pass. I do have one more thing. This is attributed to Dave Barry. I saw my cousin sent this to me. Dave Barry apparently talked about 15 things it took him 50 years to learn, like these things. And I thought you guys, OG, you're getting up there. So it's probably time for you to know these lessons.
46, brother. Not even close, but go ahead.
Which means he's learned almost none of this.
Number 1, never under any circumstances take a sleeping pill and a laxative on the same night. That could end a little badly.
Never needed to take either.
Does that one take you 50 years to learn, by the way? That one, although we did remember when we talked to Betty Thesky from Betty in the Sky with a Suitcase, and she talked about people that take Ambien and drink on a plane, and then they do Ambien zombie weird stuff on a plane. Number 2, if you had to identify in one word the reason why the human race has not achieved and never will achieve its full potential, the word would be meetings. Totally 100% agree with that. I have a sister-in-law who was planning stuff with Cheryl and their other sister, who insisted on having Zoom meetings to plan this ridiculousness instead of just chatting about it. And then when they had the meeting, nothing got done. And the sister-in-law who planned the meeting didn't end up doing any of the stuff she said she was going to do in the meeting, which is great. Number 3, there's a very fine line between hobby and mental illness.
Yep.
Some people have said that about my board game addiction lately. I was in our local newspaper about board games, by the way, which
local crazy man. Quells his craziness.
I loved how Leia in our Facebook group, when I was bragging about the Facebook group, she's like, something about like, old dad vibes or something.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, great.
When the newspaper photographer had to go back into his camera bag to get the super wide angle lens to make sure he captured all of your board games in the shot, Joe, that should have been a clue to you that maybe you could pare down.
Number 4, people who want to share their religious views with you almost never want you to share yours with them. How often was that true? Number 5, and this is a good one. When I was at Camp 5, we talked a lot about this one. You should not confuse your career with your life. That's a big one. How many people, especially men historically, have fallen for that one? Number 6, nobody cares if you can't dance well, just get up and dance. I'd say that's true, but you guys make fun of us every time we record a Friday show, and you get to see me dance in that video that's up on YouTube.
It happened one time.
I do agree with that, though. Just go dance. Just go have fun. Number 7. Have you ever seen anybody do this, by the way? Number 7 is never lick a steak knife.
I lick steak knives. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, what?
You lick your steak knife?
All the time. Of course.
Your mom calls it.
Not funny, OG. Not funny. Number 8, the most destructive force in the universe is gossip. Number 9, you will never find anybody who can give you a clear and compelling reason why we observe daylight savings time. Have you ever found anybody who can logically tell you why we have daylight savings time?
I know exactly why we do it.
Why is that, OG?
Go live in Seattle or New York and tell me that you want it to get dark at 2:30 in the afternoon in winter and stay light until midnight in the summer. No one wants that.
I think you're wrong. I think you're way wrong.
You think people want it to be dark at 2:30 at night or
It's
3
not gonna
o'clock?
be dark at 2:30 at night.
No, that's a little early, but I did when I lived in London in the winter, it was nearly pitch dark at like 5:30-ish.
Hey Siri, what time is sunset on December 21st in Detroit, Michigan? Oh, Siri can't check the weather that far out. Google can, I bet.
While he's doing that, here's another one for guys, Doug. You'll like this. You should never, ever say anything to a woman that even remotely suggests you think she's pregnant unless you can actually see a baby emerging from her at that moment.
When's the baby due?
A wonderful Brian Regan piece.
Sunset in Seattle on 12/21 is 4:20 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
What if it was 3:20? Kids would be going home from school in the dark on the bus.
Oh, I forgot. It says the only person who can explain daylight savings time is OG, is what it says right here.
There you go.
Dave Barry never met OG.
Number 11, there comes a time, we have a birthday coming up, OG. We have a birthday coming up. One member of the team's birthday is coming up in just a couple weeks. And there comes a time, Doug, when you should stop expecting other people to make a big deal about your birthday. And you know what that age is, according to Dave Barry? 11.
My birthday month's in a couple months too. That's neat.
My birthday month. Did you see how he slipped that in there?
Yes.
My birthday month.
It's so awesome that he's 3 months away. He's 3 months away and he's making a big deal of his birthday.
Birthday month.
The whole month. We have to all celebrate the whole month.
It's
OG's
fair
month.
based on when it actually is.
Uh-huh.
Doug, have you ever gotten a birthday and Halloween gift at the same time? I got you this. It doubles as both your Halloween costume and a birthday gift. No, you have not. Thank you very much.
It's a Freddy Krueger outfit. Happy birthday.
Hey, Joe, have you ever been like, well, we were going to go out to dinner for your birthday, but since it's Valentine's Day, we'll do that instead? No, you have not.
It's a twofer.
Thank you very much.
I love you very
I
much.
rest my case.
Happy Valentine's. We got you these crappy little heart candies.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Leftovers. CVS had this on
The
sale.
one thing that unites all human beings, regardless of age, gender, religion, economic status, or ethnic background, is that deep, deep down inside, we all believe we're above average drivers.
Okay, next.
You don't believe you're an above average. You totally believe you're an above average driver.
I don't. It's not a belief system. It's a knowing.
There's data to prove it.
Absolutely.
And the data is in my brain. Number 13. This, by the way, is so true. This one is not even funny. It's just true. A person who's nice to you but rude to the waiter is not a nice person. I found that. It's always amazing. You go out to lunch with people and then you see how they are to the waiter, and you're immediately you know a lot about that person. They say that the truth is out on the golf course.
It's an interview. It's an interview tip, right? You go take somebody out to dinner, but the gimmick is they get the wrong food. And so then you watch how they react when they get the wrong food.
Oh, that's a great idea.
If you're the interviewer, you got to orchestrate that, right? Ahead of time.
100%.
Tell them, hey, bring this other guy the wrong food.
Yep.
Yeah.
Overcook the steak, see what happens.
Number 14, your friends will love you anyway. At number 15, I like this one as a place to leave this for today. Never be afraid to try something new. Remember that a lone amateur built the Ark. A large group of professionals built the Titanic. Apparently, according to Dave Barry, via my cousin John. Thanks, John. Nice list. All right, Doug, on that note, besides the fact that OG should still celebrate his birthday month, what should we have learned today?
Well, Joe, here's what's stacked up on our to-do list for today. First, take some advice from Megan Gorman. While our country's had some brilliant leaders, even the best of us, Ulysses Grant, FDR, me, Calvin Coolidge, among others, have made mistakes with investments. It shows that you shouldn't let fear stand in your way. Get started. Second, happy birthday, ERISA. Let's celebrate by adding another percentage or two into the 401k, everyone. Who's with me? But the big lesson? Okay, I realize now my mistake, and Ohio is not an actual prison. That said, I'd still tunnel out in the middle of the night to West Virginia. Thanks to Megan Gorman for joining us today. You'll find her new book, All the President's Money, wherever books are sold. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2024, and is created by Joe Saul-Sehy. Joe gets help from a few of our neighborhood friends. You'll find out about our awesome team at stackingbenjamins.com, along with the show notes and how you can find us on YouTube and all the usual social media spots. Come say hello. Oh yeah, and before I go, not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamin Show.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.